Hello and welcome back. Today we are talking about observation of learning. Now this is one of the things that teachers can and should be doing all the time in the classroom. And this is one of the 6 forms of assessment that we talked about in an earlier video. So observation of learning is the one where the teacher is using her eyes to see what's going on in the classroom. And today you will be developing awareness of how to monitor learning. I just want to say, when I talk about monitoring, I'm drawing on a model of language curriculum design that looks like this. And you can see in the center there is this circle here, which describes what happens in the classroom. And the bottom segment of this circle is called monitoring and assessing. And I apologize if it's too small for you to read successfully. But the point is that in this model of curriculum design, monitoring and assessing are together as a way of finding out what learners have learned. And this model comes from a book I've mentioned before, Language Curriculum Design, with Professor Paul Nation. So monitoring, what's the purpose of it? Well, its purpose is it can answer certain questions. Questions like, how will I know that learning is happening? Or, what are the signs of learning? These, I think, are very important questions for teachers to be able to answer. So I'm going to illustrate what I mean with a couple of examples. The first one is a speed reading course. Speed reading, also known as timed reading, is a way of developing reading fluency. So in a course like this, you have a number of texts, let's say 20. They are all of exactly the same length. They all use exactly the same frequency of vocabulary, and each one is followed by 10 comprehension questions. When the students have finished, they record both their reading speed and their comprehension score in a graph that looks like this. For the teacher, it's really, really easy. She or he can walk around the class and a quick glance will show how the students are going. Now, ideally, you want the students to be going like this, getting faster. That's the goal of the course. But sometimes it doesn't go like that. Maybe it's a flat line, or maybe it's, heaven forbid, going down. So the teacher, by a quick glance, can see how the students are progressing. And also, if the line is not in the desired upward direction, make suggestions about what the student should be doing based on their comprehension scores. Now, there's a lot more I could be saying about speed reading, but this is a simple example of observation of learning. No marking, no testing, but immediate useful information for the teacher. The second example comes from a chapter in a recently published book, a chapter I wrote. And it's about an activity called Say and Do. It's a very simple activity. The students draw a grid like this, 3 squares by 3 squares. The teacher gives instructions. Very simple instructions. So perhaps I might say, in the top left-hand square, write the letter P. And you hope that this is what the students do. So you keep on giving instructions and it starts to be filled in, perhaps like this. And if you want to, you can make the last instruction a bit more complex, just to challenge the students. You might say, in the square between the letter P and the letter T, write the letter D. But you don't have to do that. You can make it much simpler. Now, the goal of this activity would be to make sure that students can distinguish and write down letters of the alphabet the English alphabet, sounds which are easily confused, PB, TD, for example. For the teacher, she or he can just walk around the class again and quickly see whether students can do this successfully or not. If they can, great, move on to the next thing. If they can't, think again. What's another way of trying to teach the students to distinguish sounds? So both of these examples I've chosen to illustrate observation of learning because they're quite easy to show on the screen. But I challenge you to think of any activity you do in the class and what signs of learning you might be looking for. Here's an example. A substitution table. Now, I'm not sure these are as common in language classrooms around the world as they used to be, but I'm sure they're still being used. So what might you be looking for as a sign of learning? Well, if it was an oral activity, perhaps it's phonological accuracy. If it was a written activity, perhaps it's grammatical accuracy. But you can very quickly see whether the students have learned what you want them to learn, if they can do the activity or not. So, I've been talking about observation of learning. In the literature that you may be reading or encountering, you often come across other terms. One term that's quite common nowadays is learning-oriented assessment. There are recent books about it, for example. I just mention this because if you come across this term learning-oriented assessment, I hope you think, okay, it's actually very similar to this concept of observation of learning because it has a great deal in common. And you shouldn't be confused when there are competing terms in the literature. Your job is to make sure you understand them and see how they're similar and how they are different. Because in the end, it's all about what the teacher observes, what the teacher sees. And the teacher should always be teaching with her eyes wide open.